Welcome to this new interview, the latest in a series of video podcasts about the new Encyclopedia of Seventh-day Adventists, the ESDA online. The Encyclopedia, or ESDA, was released on July 1st, and it is the Adventist Church's first online reference work. It features thousands of articles from around the world on a variety of topics, including articles on Adventist missionaries, evangelists, institutions, organizations, and beliefs. If you haven't checked the ESDA website yet, please do so. It's at encyclopedia.adventist.org. And you can browse thousands of articles and photographs, and increasingly a number of videos. Our guest today is Dr. Barry Oliver. Dr. Oliver is one of the most distinguished historians of the Seventh-day Adventist Church, especially of its organization and administration, and he is the former president of the South Pacific Division from 2007 to 2015. Dr. Oliver has served as the ESDA editor for the South Pacific Division. Dr. Oliver, thank you very much for agreeing to talk with us today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trim, Dr. Santrac. It is a pleasure indeed.
Tell us something about your role in the ESDA project. What does it mean to be an assistant editor for a division? What does the job involve, and what have you found the most rewarding part of it?
Thank you very much. It is quite a role, actually. It involves, first of all, selecting the articles that we wish to have included in the encyclopedia from the South Pacific region. It involves selecting appropriate authors and then equipping them to do the work that we're asking them to do. Now, fortunately for me, you have done much of that work in preparing the manuals and the guidelines, etc. So thank you for that. That made the work of the authors much easier. My role then is, once the article is written, is to work with the author to get the article ready for publication, to edit the article where necessary, and then to ask a referee or referees to actually referee the article. We want these articles to be accurate, to be trustworthy sources of information that we can rely on as accurate a picture of our history as is possible. Sure. Then, of course, we need to submit the article for publication and continue to work with Dr. Santrac and others to prepare what we have today. Yes, yes. Rewarding? I think for me, the most rewarding part has been seeing the delight on the faces of many people when, for the very first time, they have written something that is going to be published. Many of our authors, in fact, have not actually published anything before. And for them, this is huge. And this is the genius of this encyclopedia. We have garnered expertise and experience from such a wide resource base in terms of our people. And this is something very, very special about this publication. Also, of course, for me, it's been rewarding to learn one or two things that I didn't know before, not just one or two. I wish I'd known years ago what I know now about our Adventist history, our institutions, our theology, our beliefs. So much richness in what has been gathered and put together in this encyclopedia.
Yes, yes. Dr. Oliver, I gather from what you are saying that the encyclopedia is not just for historians and scholars. Is that true? And how will the ESDA benefit people in your territory?
I believe you're exactly right. This encyclopedia has something for everyone. I think young people who are in our schools, who are doing research projects, in our colleges and universities, lay people who want to find out something about their history. Let me tell you something about my wife. We have an article that we're going to talk about a little later on her grandparents. And I kept going out to her when I was doing the research for the article and say, Julie, did you know this about your grandparents? No, she said. And she was absolutely delighted to find out something about her grandparents. Well, the same will be repeated over and over again right around the world, not only about grandparents, but about people we have heard about or people we know of. This is going to be something that, while academically very rich, fully resourced, fully documented, with endnotes and sources, at the same time is written in a style that will be very readable, I believe, for everybody.
Yes.
It's interesting what you say there. You know, I reflect on going to college at Newbold and living in a men's dormitory named after a legendary, as I later realized, pioneer missionary called George Keogh. And I think all around the world we have Adventist colleges with residence halls, with classroom buildings, administrative buildings that have names on them. And probably generations of students have gone through thinking, who is that, if they even think about it at all? And I think many people will immediately make that connection. They don't have to have the family connection, though of course many do. But many people will find a spot at which they can say, yes, I resonate with that.
Yes, you're so right. I mean, I think right on that point, there are probably three things that stand out for me. The first thing is information. What we are talking about here is learning about people, places, institutions, etc. Secondly, identity. This subject helps us to understand who we are as the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Who are our people? What made them do what they did? What drove them? What was in their heart, if you like? So information, identity, and the third thing, inspiration. Have I ever been inspired as I work through the various articles that have come from our part of the world? Inspiration is something that you can get in spades by reading the information that we have in this encyclopedia.
And I also think that we learn to appreciate the church even more when we realize the sacrifice and then the commitment and all the struggles people before us went through to have a church that we have today, to have these institutions. So it made us think, hey, I want to do my part. I want to continue the legacy. And we learn to really appreciate the church that we have today and don't take it for granted. Yes. That's been a huge part for me, definitely.
Yes.
I couldn't agree more. We do just take it for granted. We somehow think it's arrived here and we're sitting here now without realising just what has happened beforehand to get us to where we are today. And that, of course, applies us for the future.
Dr. Oliver, tell us something about your team. You mentioned you've had many people who've never written for publication before, but then, as we know from our office, because we see them all, of course, you've had a few much published authors who indeed have published many articles. Tell us something about how you mobilize people in the South Pacific.
It was a very interesting process getting the authors, as used to mobilized. We've actually used in this part of the world 130 authors. We have used 54 referees. So that's nearly 200 people that have been involved just in the South Pacific Division. And those authors have come from a wide variety of backgrounds. We have historians, people who are academic historians. We have academics from other fields. We have administrators. We have church employees, teachers, pastors, office assistants. And then we have a large number of professional people, lay people who have written. I'm thinking, for example, of attorney Stuart Tipple. Stuart has been the attorney for the Chamberlain family and has written a very, very excellent article from first-hand experience on the Chamberlain legal case in Australia, which I'm sure many of our viewers will have heard of. This article should be read because Stuart has been right at the front line from beginning to end. Then there are others who have written both from a professional background, writing about family members, for example. I think of Alwyn Gillis, also an attorney, who's written about his experience and his parents' experience in the South Pacific. I think of Dr. Kelvin Hon, who wrote about his parents, Eric and Hazel Hon, who were leaders in health education throughout the Pacific and then later in North America. And so we could go on. These people are drawn from rich experience, and of course, many of them, in fact, I would say most of them, are very capable researchers. So I'm thinking of, let me just name for you 5 people who I think have done outstanding work. First of all, Dr. Milton Hook. I added up the number of articles that Dr. Hook has written to this point, and let me just get this right. He has written 213 articles. 213, and some of these articles are huge. I think of the article he's written on at least Avondale University College. It's over 20,000 words in length. That's almost a mini master's thesis. So Milton has made a huge contribution. He's also written articles, I understand, for the North American division as well. Yes. And so when you say he's written 213, that's just for our division, and he's made other contributions. I think of Dr. Lester Devine. Les has written 73 articles. Shirley Tarburton, who has a master's degree in history, 43 articles. Pastor Ross Goldstone, 14 articles. Dr. Gilbert Valentine has written for us 11 articles, and I know he's written several others as well.
Yeah,
so,
quite a number for other places too, yes.
Yes, considerable contributions. I mean, those 5 people alone have written 354 articles between them. And that's a massive contribution, and I just pay a tribute to them and many, many others who have made this possible.
And we gladly pay tribute to them as well.
Yes.
Dr. Hook is easily has the highest score. Not all of our viewers will get this reference, but he has the double century up. It's a cricket metaphor. You know, perhaps we can even get him up to the rare triple century if we give him the right inducements, because there are of course more articles to write. But you know, that's also a tremendous pool to be able to draw from. That you were able to draw from that kind of enthusiasm. Was it hard to get them motivated?
I was very fortunate to have some very motivated people. To encourage, not everybody that was asked to write an article actually wrote an article. I still have a small number of outstanding articles that I somehow doubt that will see the light of day, but you never know. The day of miracles is not over.
Perhaps after this video, you'll get some authors contacting you and saying, hey, I want to contribute.
Let's hope they come out
Let's
of the woodwork.
hope, yes.
Yes. Now, you mentioned earlier that your wife's grandparents have an article in the encyclopedia. Who are they? Tell us, why are they in the encyclopedia, and what was the experience like of editing an article that is so close to you?
Well, their names are Francis Arthur and Evelyn Allum, A-L-L-U-M. Actually, I wrote this article myself.
So not just edited it, you wrote it, right?
That was even better.
So some pressure on.
Oh, yes. Arthur and Evelyn Allum were the first Australian missionaries sent by the church to China. Now, they had been preceded by a self-supporting literature evangelist by the name of Arthur Caldwell. He had gone just a few months before them. They were actually sent by the church in 1906. They were early days of our work in China. And they were indeed my wife's paternal grandparents. Her father was born in China, as were 5 of their 6 children. her father's brothers and sisters. They worked between 1906 and 1922 in China, pioneering many of the territories, including the western province of Sichuan. I think that's how you pronounce it. Arthur Allen had a real vision for China. It was like something burning in his bones. And particularly Western China. From the moment they arrived in China, he wanted to open up the work of the church in the western provinces of China, where there was little Christianity, let alone Seventh-day Adventist presence.
And the distances, you know, I don't think people would appreciate today, were vast. China is a huge country, and if you're going, the east is the coastal fringes where all the Europeans and Australians were. So the you know, the length of time it would have taken him just to get there would have been formidable.
Yes, I'm trying now. You've stumped me. In the article, it tells us how long they took to travel up the Yangtze River to get there. It was something like 30 or 40 days.
It was several weeks, because I remember reading it and it stood out, yes.
And two of them, including Arthur Allen, travelled to the city of what was then Chongqing. Now it's Chongqing. And actually, Julie and I, my wife and I, had the privilege of travelling along the Yangtze River, tracing the footsteps of her grandfather just 18 months or so ago. And we came to the city of Chongqing. It was really quite moving. Julie stood there in the village, not the village, the city square, with tears in her eyes, thinking that in this very place, almost 100 years exactly, previously, her grandparents had pioneered the work of the church in this vast area of China. And some amazing stories about the fighting that was happening at that time in China, about how important it was to contextualize the message by sing appropriately, by wearing the queue, which is the long pigtail, speaking the language. Julie's father, Lawrence, his first language was Mandarin. And I still remember him as a 80-plus-year-old man speaking Chinese. Certainly lost a lot of it by that stage. But of course, as a child, he spoke Chinese all the time. An amazing story illustrating the work of so many who made the ultimate sacrifice in many ways in those early days of our church history.
Yeah, when you mentioned the local national dress, I really appreciate the photographs that you contributed along with the article.
Yes.
Like close to 20 beautiful historical photographs. I think most of them people have never seen, and for the first time they'll be published in the ESDA. That's a huge contribution.
And to all our readers, or all our viewers rather, potential readers, quite seriously, read the article on Francis Allum, A-L-L-U-M, because it's an extraordinary story. And as my colleague, Dr. Santrac, has said, it has these wonderful photos that probably, Barry, only you and your family have seen before.
Well, you know what? When my wife's dad passed away, Lawrence Allum passed away, son of Arthur and Evelyn, I found an old slide box in his garage. And some of those photos were old stereopticon slides in that slide box, an incredible find. I've now put it in the Heritage Centre at...
Good. Glad to hear it. Yeah. Individuals are one thing, but then of course an assistant editor also has to provide articles on organizations and on countries. One of the interesting things about the South Pacific Division, of course, is you have so many islands. Ellen White, of course, when she referred to the region, often spoke of the islands of the sea. That means a very complex task for you to do justice to them all. Having grown up in Australia, I'm familiar with some of the islands of the South Pacific, but there were some islands that were new to me, including the islands of Musal, Emorau, and Tench, islands off the coast of Papua New Guinea. Tell us something about them, Barry.
Everybody has heard the story of Pitcairn. Pitcairn Island has a very special place in the history of the Seventh-day Adventist Church because John Tay, an early missionary, convinced the islanders on Pitcairn to all become Seventh-day Adventists. And, well, the rest is history, as they say. But there were probably only between 100 and 200 people who lived on Pitcairn at that time. The islands of Musau, Emorau, and Tench are 3 islands off the northeast coast of Papua New Guinea, very close to the equator, by the way. And those 3 islands also recorded every inhabitant becoming a Seventh-day Adventist. This happened about 1930, some 40 years or more after the story of Pitcairn. Up until that time, the islanders themselves, frankly, were cannibals. They had had very little exposure to Christianity or to any form of colonization. They were engaging in intertribal warfare, etc. They were a very interesting group of people. But in 1931, Gilbert McLaren, Captain Gilbert McLaren, or Pastor Gilbert McLaren, on his ship of Vilamani, arrived on the southern coast of the largest island. He noticed that almost immediately a large group of canoes set out from the shore toward the ship. Knowing a little of the history of the islands, they were somewhat nervous, to say the least. And as the canoes came closer, they said, "What are we going to do?" So since a number of the crew of the ship were Solomon Islanders and from other parts of New Guinea, they began to sing. Let me tell you, these people know how to sing. And they sang, "Anywhere with Jesus, I can safely go." The islanders were so entrenched that they stopped in their canoes and listened. Long story short, they learned how to sing. Some missionaries were sent to care for the spiritual needs and to help them to study the Bible. And within a very few years, some 2,000 people had become Seventh-day Adventists.
Wow.
From that small group of islands, hundreds of people have gone to other areas of Papua New Guinea and in fact the world to share the gospel. And it is absolutely an amazing story. While I was there, because it was part of our territory when we lived in the New Guinea Islands region, we had the 50th anniversary. This is back in the early 1980s. Well, in fact, it was 1981. And we celebrated the, in fact, I've sent you a photo, Dr. Santrac, of that celebration. And you can see all the people dressed in white to celebrate the arrival of the first Adventist missionaries some 50 years before. Well, now, of course, we're getting up toward 100 years that event happened. And the islands continue to make an amazing contribution. I think of a young girl who was at the Beaulieu School when I was there by the name of Lallan. Lallan Simeon is now the Deputy Vice Chancellor of Pacific Adventist University in New Guinea. Dr. Jennifer Littau, another young girl who was at school when I was there, she's now one of the senior professors at Pacific Adventist University. And so I could go on. An amazing story of God's providence in those 3 islands.
Yeah, amazing story indeed. I believe that both Dr. Trim and I attempted to ask more questions, but I would say we don't want to reveal the entire story. Instead, we want to invite our viewers to read the article at encyclopedia.adventist.org. Wonderful article with beautiful photographs and a very impressive, inspiring story indeed.
and many other articles like that. Dr. Oliver, as we unfortunately have to draw to a close, we would love to keep chatting with you, but we know probably not all of our viewers would want to keep watching. Perhaps we can get you back at some point to talk about some of the other articles. How would you view the ESDA, and thinking now not just as a scholar, which you've been, but also as a church administrator and a pastor, is there something that is just for scholars? With your breadth of experience, you can speak to this. Does it have a wider value? And if so, what would you see it as being?
A little of what I said before comes back into play here, I think, Dr. Trim, and that is it provides information, and information for everyone, whether you're an academic, a scholar, a professional, an administrator, a pastor, a school student, a college student. There is information there for everyone. The breadth here is stunning, really. And as more and more articles are added to the encyclopedia, it will only increase its usefulness. And the amazing thing is, of course, that being online, we can continually update, we can continue to add. If we find deficiencies or things that need to be added into an article, or as we've already said, new articles, it can be so easily done. So it becomes eminently useful. It is also eminently searchable. The web page is set up very, very well. In fact, I would say it's stunning. And I've been able to access it a little thus far in preparation. And it is very, very useful, a tool that will go on for years to come in its contribution to the work of the church. And so I take my hat off to those who were involved in the design, in the preparation. I pay tribute to, I guess we have hundreds, if not thousands, of authors around the world, editors, people who have been making contribution. I think this is something that is going to be very special for our church. I'm not sure about, but my thinking is this is probably the largest project that we've ever embarked on as a global church. Would that be right?
I think so, because the works produced in the 50s and early 60s, including the SDA Encyclopedia, were just written by a small team at a publishing house. And the biblical dictionary work that's going on is on a smaller scale. So I hadn't thought of it, but I think I'm quite sure you're right. This is the largest project the Seventh-day Adventist Church has ever embarked on.
I don't think we... Yes, please, Dr. Oliver, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, again, I'm only going off my own personal knowledge, but it is stunning. And I think it's something that people, the more they become familiar with this project and what resources are available, the more they're going to become excited and thankful for what we have.
I don't think we have mentioned this earlier, but probably some of our viewers are wondering, do I have to subscribe to use the encyclopedia? Do I need to pay something? Is there a fee? Or is it available?
And the answer, of course, is it's freely available. Again, the website is encyclopedia.adventist.org. And I'll also say we have more articles that still need to be written. And if anyone watching feels inspired to join the ranks, to become another Milton Hook, or even write one article, then please email us at encyclopedia@gc.adventist.org. That email again is encyclopedia@gc.adventist.org. Dr. Oliver, thank you so much for joining us. You know, I go back to your description of your wife standing on the shore of the Yangtze where her grandfather had stood. And not everyone can do that, but what I like to think of the encyclopedia as doing is providing that in a sort of figurative form, that not everyone can do that, but we can all, through reading the articles, place ourselves in the shoes of those who've gone before us, who have built up this wonderful worldwide church. And so the fact that we have articles that really do take people to the shore, like the one you wrote on alum and many other articles from the South Pacific, is wonderful. And we want to thank you and your team for having made such a stellar contribution.
Thank you so much. We've been honored and privileged to contribute.
Dr. Oliver, thank you again, and to our viewers, thank you for joining us. Be on the lookout for another video podcast about the ESDA coming soon.